Good morning, I'm Dani Laurel. It's Friday the 27th of February, bringing you Morning Matters because your mornings matter. Rodrigo Duterte's legal team took center stage at The Hague yesterday, mounting a stiff defense against crimes against humanity charges. Lead counsel Nicholas Kaufman questioned the credibility of the prosecution's insider witnesses and argued that drug-related killings actually increased after Duterte left office. The Office of the Ombudsman is now assessing the credibility of 18 whistleblowers who claim to have delivered flood control kickbacks to high-ranking public officials. And the Philippine Medical Association renewed its commitment to achieve zero dengue deaths by the year 2030. PMA stressed it is possible through a combination of vector control, early diagnosis, and the urgent approval of new generation vaccines to protect the public. Welcome to our program, Morning Matters, where we talk about the issues you need to know for the rest of your day. Now, first on the agenda. On day 3 of former President Duterte's confirmation of charges hearing in The Hague, defense lawyer Nicholas Kaufman pushed back against the prosecution's claims, questioning the interpretation of Duterte's speeches, disputing key pieces of evidence, and insisting that there is no direct proof linking Duterte to the alleged extrajudicial killings. Here's that report.
On the third day of the International Criminal Court's confirmation of charges hearing, it was the camp of former President Rodrigo Duterte that fired back at the prosecution's arguments. But before that, Duterte's lawyer, attorney Nicholas Kaufman, clarified that the defense does not intend to disrespect the souls of the deceased.
The defense does not disrespect the soul of any deceased person, nor does it make light of the loss of life.
Kaufman also took aim at the Philippine media. He argued that journalists tend to focus only on the more sensational portions of Duterte's speeches.
Journalists and their editors have a tendency to fixate on the salacious elements of a person's speeches while ignoring the less interesting parts.
It can be recalled that the prosecution presented several of Duterte's past statements about the war on drugs, statements that made headlines at the time. These include Duterte's alleged admission that he was responsible for killings carried out by police. But Kaufman countered that the prosecution failed to show other parts of those speeches, which he said demonstrate the legal use of self-defense by police officers.
And the order is simply this: go out, arrest them if you can. But if there is no peaceful method of doing it and you're presented with violent resistance, thereby placing your jeopardy in your life, you shoot.
For this reason, Kaufman argued that Duterte's speeches alone are not enough to directly link him to extrajudicial killings.
The point we merely wish to make is that relying on the former prosecutor's speeches as a means of proving criminal intent is impossible.
Meanwhile, Davao City-based journalist Ben Jason Teshorna objected to the prosecution's presentation of his video, which showed Duterte watching CCTV footage of the killing of 3 suspected thieves at Agdao Public Market in 2013. In his affidavit, Teshorna said the prosecution did not have permission to use his copyrighted video. He also denied any association with what he described as a tampered or spliced version of the footage, saying its broadcast has damaged his reputation and put his family at risk. Kaufman further insisted that there is no smoking gun, no direct evidence proving that Duterte ordered police officers to kill.
Not one witness relevant to any of the 49 incidents with which Mr. Rodrigo Duterte is charged will testify that he received a direct order from the former president to go out and kill someone.
The defense also questioned the crimes against humanity charge. Kaufman argued that compared to the number of arrests made during the anti-drug campaign, the number of deaths was significantly smaller. He also claimed that the entire civilian population was not targeted, one of the required elements in proving crimes against humanity.
To me, and as a matter of logic, it would appear that the targeted population in the Duterte case was selected randomly.
He added that the alleged 9 killings in Davao City cannot be considered widespread. Kaufman also disputed claims about an alleged mass grave at a quarry site in Davao City, saying it was not proven that the remains were linked to extrajudicial killings and could have even dated back to World War II.
They could have dug up the entire city of Davao, but all they have managed to produce, the prosecution on the matter, is a reference to Leila de Lima in a Senate committee where she talks about the discovery of a few human remains which could have belonged to World War II Japanese soldiers.
In the second session of the hearing, Kaufman questioned the prosecution's use of the word neutralization, which it equated with murder and anti-drug operations. He argued that neutralization does not necessarily mean killing. Kaufman cited statements from Senator Bato de la Rosa and the revised Philippine National Police operational procedures, saying the term may refer to arrest and detention through lawful means.
In an interview relied on by the prosecution at footnote 136 of the pre-confirmation brief, de la Rosa explains how tok hang means knock and plead, and that it is a totally legitimate police strategy. However, the citations relied on by the prosecution to infer that tok hang was a criminal modus operandi are completely taken out of context.
Meanwhile, President Bongbong Marcos is hands off these developments over at the International Criminal Court, or the ICC, in The Hague. Palace Press Officer Undersecretary Claire Castro said if former President Rodrigo Duterte does not want to attend either his confirmation of charges hearing or pre-trial detention hearing, that is his decision. Castro also did not give a categorical answer whether President Marcos wants the Philippines to rejoin the ICC. The Philippines officially withdrew from the Foreign Tribunal back in 2019.
Ang Pangulo po kasi at ang administrasyon na ito ay hindi po makikialam sa nasabing hearing. Kung ang nais po ng dating Pangulong Duterte ay hindi magpakita sa taong bayan, kanya pong desisyon yan. At kung ito naman po ay naresolba ng ICC, napayagan siya na huwag magpakita at hindi maging present sa kanyang sariling hearing, igagalang po natin yan.
Meanwhile, the National Unity Party says it has no official stand yet on the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte. This comes after an earlier party statement suggested the NUP may not support the impeachment unless new and compelling evidence emerges. But party chairman and Deputy Speaker Ronnie Puno clarified this does not reflect a unified position, saying members remain divided and may instead vote according to their conscience. The NUP is the second largest bloc in the House.
I doubt that there will be a uniform party stand here. No, because there is just too much division among our members. So the tendency now, or the direction now, is that we probably will have parang a conscience vote, no? That everybody will be allowed to vote the way he wants to vote. There is no clear, there's no clear bias or leaning towards either side at this point.
The Office of the Ombudsman has received a transmittal containing a joint affidavit executed by 18 individuals who claim to be former security personnel of ex-lawmaker Zaldico through their lawyer, attorney Levi Baligod. Here is that report.
A joint affidavit executed by 18 self-identified former soldiers has been submitted to the Office of the Ombudsman. They claim to have delivered flood control kickbacks to public officials, including to President Bongbong Marcos. Their legal counsel, attorney Levi Baligod, submitted the affidavit but clarified that it is not yet a formal complaint, only a referral. He said the purpose is for the Ombudsman to determine whether prima facie evidence exists against the officials implicated.
Nirefer namin sa Office of the Ombudsman para magkaroon lamang ng prima facie proof na merong offense na nakumit at ang mga napangalanan doon ay maaaring guilty sa mga offenses na ito. Ano ang mga offenses na ito? Ito ay mga pupwedeng violations ng Republic Act 3019 o yung Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. Number 2, yung Republic Act 6713 na nagbabawal na tumanggap ang mga opisyal ng kahit anumang regalo. Ang basehan po namin ay tumanggap sila ng milyon-milyon na pera, pero hindi po yan naipakita sa kanilang salin.
The affidavit alleges that 7 senators and 26 members of the House received kickbacks from former Congressman Zaldico. For its part, the Office of the Ombudsman assured the public that it will exercise fairness, objectivity, and professionalism in evaluating the submission. Senate President Pro Tempore Ping Lacson questioned the group's claim that 805 billion pesos in kickbacks were delivered, saying the figure does not add up based on government flood control allocations. The amount would represent about 70% of the total flood control funds from 2023 to 2025.
So kung ang napunta kay Congressman Zaldico allegedly 805, saan manggagaling yung napunta kay Bernardo? Saan ang napunta kay Alcantara?
So sobra yung computation?
Sobra computation.
But Attorney Baligon has an explanation.
Pero meron tayong irrigation projects na maraming ghost dyan. Okay, at makikita nyo naman, kahapon lang naglabas ng statement si Congressman Erice na di umano yung 2 billion na confidential fund ng customs ay kinuha daw ng ating presidente. No? So maraming pwedeng panggalingan.
Meanwhile, Malacanang responded to former Congressman Mike Defensor's warning that a second batch of whistleblowers may soon come forward.
Mike Defensor, the known Wonder Boy. Marami sa kanyang talumpati ang naghihikayat sa ating mga kababayan na tanggalin sa pwesto ang ating Pangulo. Alam na natin ang motibo. Mike Defensor again? Ador Mawanay 2.0? Kilala ang salitang mawanay dahil sa pamimilit di umano sa kanya na gumawa ng peking salaysay.
In an interview with Storycon, Defensor said the palace had the wrong spin on the Ador Mawanay angle, as he had nothing to do with that. He also denied organizing the 18 alleged bagmen, though he expressed support for them.
I will help out in whatever way I can, because what they're saying is true. But that the government should address the issue, Bongbong Marcos should address the issue, the senators and the congressmen, ano yung perang dinideliver.
In The Hague, the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court also issued a statement after being drawn into the controversy. The prosecutor's office said it independently gathers information relevant to its investigations, with activities funded through the ICC's official budget. Baligod's group earlier alleged that Zaldico and former Senator Sani Trillanes funded the expenses of ICC investigators while they were in the country looking into the drug war of former President Rodrigo Duterte.
And don't go away, we will be back with more stories after this quick break. Good morning, I'm Dani Laurel, and here on Morning Matters, we talk about the most pressing issues and give you the context behind the headlines. This week saw a series of major political developments both at home and abroad. The confirmation of charges hearing against former President Rodrigo Duterte at the International Criminal Court began this week in The Hague, with both prosecution and defense laying out their arguments. As the proceedings gained global attention, misinformation also surfaced online, including a fake post falsely attributed to One News, prompting a warning against the spread of disinformation. Back here in Congress, the impeachment complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte have been formally referred to the House Committee on Justice, which will determine whether the cases are sufficient in form and substance. Meanwhile, controversy continues over the so-called bagmen issue. That's after a lawyer linked to the allegations faced scrutiny over errors and inconsistencies in statements related to the claims. And joining us now is political analyst Richard Haydarian and international relations expert and columnist. Richard, hello from Manila. How are you? What time is it there?
Almost 1 a.m. Good morning, good evening.
Very faithful to the cause. All right, lots to discuss here. Let's kick off with yesterday's defense with Kaufman. No? He is known to be, quote-unquote, superstar ICC lawyer, and he did show his prowess yesterday. Give us your initial reacts to that.
Well, I'll leave it to the top legal experts to break down the validity of the arguments raised. But from what I gathered through multiple visits to The Hague, including earlier this week, talking to experts, talking to different people who are familiar with not only Kaufman, but also what's happening in the court. I mean, I think really their best shot was really questioning the jurisdiction of the court. And the moment they could not get that, the rest is honestly, many people see this as really as muddying the water. And to be honest, my read here is that Kaufman was more like a Harry Roque, meaning more like a spokesman, making more political statements, rather than what I think any real legal analyst would see as substantive statements that could put President Duterte in a better position, given the preponderance of evidence and witnesses that is provided by the prosecution side.
You have probably looked at other trials or pre-trials that the ICC has seen. Can you give us more color on whether this sits in a box of one that will most likely end in a trial, and those that were quote-unquote junked or dismissed or amended? There have been cases where some have been put into trial, were never convicted.
Well, absolutely, including in one case that Kaufman was involved. Medyo nakalusot yung kanyang hinandle na person. So he's not totally zero when it comes to handling of cases when it comes to the ICC. But what I've noticed is if you look at the basically the samples across time, there's actually a debate. For some people, you can make a projection based on historical analysis by looking at comparable cases. But there are also some people who say that this is a very sui generis case as far as President Duterte is concerned. I mean, without a question, he's the most high-profile person to be tried. He's the first leader from Asia. And the threshold of evidence and other kind of parang pre-trial determination that is in it by the court, it's a very high threshold. So for us to even reach this point, including the court shutting down jurisdiction question, that shows that the job of the defense team is very, very difficult. They will really have to prove that all of these preponderance of evidence that the other side is providing either is forged or lacks validity, or there's something fundamentally wrong. And that's why I'm not surprised that the strategy basically of the defense team is to make extraneous kind of arguments that go beyond the parameters of the legal debate and go more into politics and PR and basically the optics of what's coming out. And of course, if you were to believe some of the critics, if the defense is compensated so generously, you have to show productivity or KPI. So maybe this is their way of showing KPI. Although, really honestly, when I talk to a lot of people on the ground at The Hague, people with expertise on this, they seem very skeptical whether President Duterte will be vindicated in these hearings, and it looks like the direction of the wind is at least for the next year or two, where we're going to go into full trial, and potentially we may have a verdict within a year or two from now.
Can you clarify a little bit about the jurisdiction issue? If you have strong courts domestically, regardless of the fact that the crimes can really be considered crimes against humanity, could it be possible that you just try the person in your own home country and it never reaches The Hague? Or is it that the moment that the crimes become something incredibly widespread and at this level, it needs to be tried in the International Criminal Court? Is there still a sort of option that the ICC says, listen, he has committed crimes, but it is not under the ICC's jurisdiction, and here you go, convict him in your own country? Is that a possibility?
Well, I mean, first of all, different states have different philosophies on how they reconcile their domestic laws and international law. Some countries have a more monist approach, meaning they see a direct symmetry, or they try to create direct symmetry between their domestic laws and international laws and conventions. And then some other countries have a much more hybrid approach. But the important concept here, and pinag-usapan natin yan over and over throughout the years, is the principle of complementarity. The ICC only comes in if there's a determination that the domestic courts are A, either unable, or B, unwilling to exercise their duties when it comes to serious allegations of mass atrocities. In this case, we're talking about thousands of extrajudicial killings. Now, inability to deal with massive atrocities usually happens in failed states or failing states, or yung mga estado na sa gitna ng civil war. Clearly, the Philippines is not that. In theory, we have functioning courts. But if you look at the evidence, out of tens of thousands, or at least the thousands that the PNP has admitted in terms of potential extrajudicial killings, how many of them were tried by local courts, right? The number is beyond disappointing, to put it mildly. As one senator said, ideally, domestic courts have to take care of it, but the numbers are not ideal. And then, of course, let's not also forget, the ICC does not take care of all cases of EJK or everyone who has been accused of getting involved in EJKs. In this case, the drug war of President Duterte. It only goes after the chief architects, basically. That's why the individuals who are wanted by the ICC, aside from President Duterte, are the de facto COOs and CEOs. So we're looking at multiple PNP chiefs, a justice secretary, a consigliere, or very close special assistant of the president. 12 of them obviously are senators right now. One of them is, I think, almost in hiding. So the ICC is not going to go after everyone who was involved in extrajudicial killings, including rank and file of the police forces. It's not going to go after mid-level officials. It goes only after the chief architects, the people who oversaw, the CEOs and CEOs, and the commander-in-chief. And in this case, that's why you have President Duterte there, and that's why Bato de la Rosa, Senator Bongo, former Justice Aguirre, among others, are also, I mean, it's just a matter of time.
Can we stop there and give us your opinion on, is there a warrant of arrest? I mean, we've heard that from Remulla before, but we haven't actually seen it. At least for the two senators. And should they be worried? As you mentioned, has it historically happened that not the chief architect has also, or these co-perpetrators have also been arrested and will be sent to The Hague? What are they afraid of then?
Well, this is where you cannot understand ICC in isolation as a legal institution, because it's interacting with real policy realities. Sa isang banda, actually, isang chine-check ko when I was at the ICC was, is it still alive and functioning? As you know, the ICC is under severe sanctions, including institutional sanctions by the Trump administration in response to what they saw as unjust issuance of warrant of arrest against a key ally, Prime Minister Netanyahu, for instance, of Israel, right? So they're already under a lot of pressure. There are a couple of even European countries who have suggested that they would not implement the warrant of arrest. So you cannot say ICC is just, it's not operating like a normal domestic court, and its enforcement capabilities are limited. Now, why is that relevant to your question? Your question is about enforcement of a warrant of arrest. And that's a very sensitive logistical issue. The ombudsman saw something, and that's why he said something, but he had to take it back precisely because there are logistical consideration, meaning you don't want to make it easy for the other side to escape potential arrest, because we saw how complicated it was in the case of President Duterte. But I personally saw at least one of those warrants of arrest. Nasilipan natin the other month, even before the ICC confirmed that, for instance, Senator Bato de la Rosa is one of the chief perpetrators, alleged perpetrators that they're looking for. So, at least for some of us, we have seen that, but the execution of that, it's going to be a much more subtle and complicated matter. I mean, the one with Duterte, for instance, was almost a James Bond level operation to lure basically Duterte to come back to the Philippines from Hong Kong, to make him feel confident enough that he can get through the airport and his supporters can get him back to Davao. There was a lot of counterintelligence, potential misinformation involved. There was a lot of tricky moves to make sure that potentially the Interpol in China or in Hong Kong would not inform Duterte. So many things had to come together. In fact, when Duterte was brought to The Hague, he had to go through not one but two different stopovers. And I was able to confirm the identity of these two stopovers. That had a lot of complications. They had to clear it with at least 2 different countries in the Middle East and North African region for him to get through that. So, sobrang komplikado at difficult yun. And that's why the ICC neither confirms nor denies whether there's a warrant of arrest, because they have to coordinate this with the law enforcement authorities, with the Interpol, so that they can effectively execute that warrant of arrest. And that's also the reason why, if someone as irrelevant as me was able to see the warrant of arrest of Bato, I'm sure Bato de la Rosa, being so important as he is, he probably has better intelligence than me. Intelligence meaning information, not intelligence per se.
Correct.
And that's
but
why
you've got Bongo still working and out and about. So what does that tell you between the two?
Well, I think maybe some of them are more confident that they could rely on political means to block this. As you know, for instance, Senator Marcos, since last year, when President Duterte was taken into the custody of ICC, she basically was not only trying to question and embarrass and interrogate officials involved in that, or even threaten them. I'm talking about former PNP chief Torre, back then, of course, former Justice Secretary, now Ombudsman Remulla, not to mention, of course, the current DLG Secretary Remulla. But also, there's this attempt to get the local courts involved. Basically, the idea is that hindi mo pwede dadalhin sa ICC kung walang say yung mga local courts. So there are efforts to create bottlenecks and roadblocks and to clog basically the pipelines of justice, right? The reality, though, is that the Philippine Supreme Court made it clear a few years ago, diba? Panon panindigo, na even if the Philippines nag-exit tayo from the Rome Statute, which was the legal basis by which we're bound by the ICC jurisdiction, may residual jurisdiction pa rin ng ICC, right? So for the crimes that were committed during the time that we were part of the ICC, cover pa rin yan. That's the determination of the Philippine Supreme Court. I know currently there is another petition, I think this is by supporters of the former president, etc., to get the Supreme Court involved. Let's wait what the Supreme Court will say on that. But so far, the operating assumption is that there should be no problem because may residual jurisdiction naman ng ICC. Because we're talking about alleged crimes that were committed when we were still party to the Rome Statute, which i.e. made us under the jurisdiction of the ICC.
Richard, in one of the things Kaufman mentioned, he said, if you already knew this and there was already evidence even before President Duterte was president, diba? And he was mayor of Davao, and some of these allegations against him occurred during his that tenure. Why did it take more than 4 years for him to even be arrested by the ICC if all of this evidence had already existed? What's a rebuttal to that? Why did it take this long?
Well, as we mentioned, right, mataas yung threshold, no, for the case to even be taken to the ICC all the way. Ang taas ng threshold, someone had to file the communication, someone had to bring forward the evidence, the witnesses had to come together. Let's be honest, when Duterte was mayor of Davao, he was untouchable. I mean, don't forget the pictures in 2013, even si Pinoy, right? The paragon of good governance and human rights. You see pictures of him chumming with Digong, because Digong was basically the big man of Davao, right? And in many ways, Mindanao. So he was basically untouchable. And there were efforts, not like there were no efforts to hold him accountable. Senator De Lima, previously as the Commission on Human Rights chief, tried to hold him accountable. In fact, she held a hearing dun sa City Hall nila sa Davao. I mean, but there were constantly efforts that prevented a proper scrutiny of that, because either previous administrations were scared of going after him, and then when Digong became the president himself, it was almost impossible to take accountability. In fact, what we know right now is that per the Ombudsman and former Justice Secretary Remulla, he has mentioned this again and again, there was systematic efforts at undermining the evidence, right? There was tampering of the evidence. They were almost making it impossible for evidence to be found. So imagine the kind of investigative, next-level evidence gathering work that the petitioners had to put together in order for this case to reach ICC. And not to mention, the ICC was trying to cooperate with the Duterte administration, basically saying, kung wala kayong ginawang mali, can we send our investigators there to go on the ground and see if all of these things Kaufman is saying na baka I don't know, Yamashita treasure nakita natin, or I don't know, from World War II nakita natin. Well, the investigators of ICC were offering, okay, let's go there. If indeed there's no evidence, then there's no problem. But Digong was blocking. And why would Digong get out of the ICC if he was not doing anything wrong? As Senator Bato back in the day would say, kung wala ka namang ginawang mali, dapat wala kang ikakatakot. So why was Duterte even adamant to take the Philippines out of the ICC? So that's why I'm saying, if you look at Kaufman's argument, walang legal rigor yan eh. But from a political communication standpoint, it's a perfect fodder for all sorts of disinformation and propaganda points we're seeing right now circulating online.
Yeah, but you know what we Filipinos, or what people, any citizen really wants to feel, is that no one is above the law, diba? That actually, finally, especially for these victims, no one is above the law. But as you mentioned, this untouchability would have continued if not possibly for political situation, diba? And that's what Kaufman has been touting, that it's simply because of this rift between BBM and VP Sara that pushed him to actually, let's say, quote unquote, possibly join forces with the ICC and cooperate with this type of investigation. If that had not happened, we would not be seeing this situation. We would not be seeing him accountable at the ICC. So can you say that there's still a risk of untouchability at these levels of office, and it's all it could be very much politically aligned, a political misalignment here?
Well, I mean, that's exactly where you can see Kaufman's argument wouldn't even pass in a high school debating team, right? Like, immediately is admitting there's politics involved. So that tells you the justice system, there's something wrong. Number two, the politics was working in the other direction, right? The idea was that if there was no political fallout, Duterte would have been protected. Well, except nagkaroon ng political fallout, so Marcos did not protect. So Marcos did not go after Digong. He just stopped protecting Digong. That's what happened, right?
True.
So they cooperated with what would have been the status quo under any normal, sane, democratic, right, and law-abiding government. So Marcos did not work against Digong. He just stopped protecting Digong. Because had Marcos not been a Duterte ally, 2022, 2023 pa lang, there could have been major moves, right? So that's where I'm saying, like, Kaufman could not even pass a high school debating team standard, right? So that's where I find a lot of problems. Nevertheless, bilang isang Pilipino, I'm embarrassed with the situation. As much as I'm happy to see an element of justice, na-meet ko yung mga biktima, yung mga nanay ng mga biktima, people have been demonized and attacked at binabastos hanggang ngayon. You see the disinformation. I don't know how much Kaufman is helping into this process by what he's doing, trying to besmirch the evidence and the witnesses, etc. But the reality is this nakakaya na umabot sa ganitong situation. Because yes, as a certain senator said, ideally, dapat our domestic courts took care of this. So that's why what's happening right now is very tragic. It's really a reflection of the failure of our domestic judicial institutions, right? And that's why hindi lang tayo umaasa sa ICC to take care of this situation, because as I mentioned a while ago, may limitasyon din ng ICC. It can only go after the big perpetrators, the chief architects, and in terms of execution of arrests, napaka-complicated yan. There's no assurance that the other chief perpetrators will be brought to justice, or at least brought to trial or detention in the ICC. So ultimately, we have to take care of this, because libo-libo sa ating kababayan na namatay. Dapat tanongin natin, paano tayo umabot dyan? Anong ginagawa ng institusyon natin? And to be fair, when we say justice system, it is not only the judiciary. Anong ginagawa ng justice secretaries natin? Paano ng Digong? Anong ginagawa ng mga iba't ibang ahensya na may kinalaman sa investigasyon, right? At not to mention, anong ginagawa ng ating legislatura? What was the checks and balance that was happening there, right? Did the Senate put up a strong fight? Remember, we ratified the Rome Statute. So there was a Senate input before we became party to the ICC, basically the regime, right? But Digong unilaterally took us out. And then medyo nag-ingay lang ng konti si Coco Pimentel, and that was it. There was no collective pushback against that. We don't even see what the Democrats are doing to Trump. And the Democrats are already being bashed as being so weak in the United States and not standing up to Trump. Well, in our version, I'm sorry, the opposition, our independents, our legislature, a lot of our politicians were close to pathetic. They were completely useless, right? In terms of holding Duterte to account. Kaya umabot tayo sa situation na yan. So I hope we have a soul searching, and we also come up with mechanisms, including Truth and Reconciliation Commission or Truth and Facts-Finding Commission, security sector reforms. Marami tayong kailangang gawin para ayusin yan because hindi lang sila digong ang involved dito. Maraming rank and file ng kapulisan, maraming mga tao na kulang, kaya umabot tayo sa libon-libong mga katulad ni Kian de los Santos na namatay under circumstances that are extremely suspicious and some would see as extrajudicial killings and mass atrocities. So to deal with that, we have to accept we failed as a whole system. Duterte was untouchable as a mayor, even more untouchable as a president, and almost untouchable until BBM was not interested in protecting him anymore. And that is an indictment of our democratic system and the failure of our justice system.
We're gonna go back to that later on. I just wanted to pick your brains on one thing. We know that in court, it's not necessarily justice that prevails or what's right, what's morally right, but simply what gets argued better or which one has more merits in the case. And sometimes you think, from just me watching this, from a moral standpoint, this Kaufman has a moral obligation, right, to at least have some level of empathy for victims. How does it work in the ICC? He's an ICC lawyer. Was he assigned? Is he completely pushed to really be on the side? Because once you watch him, it really seems, wow, he seems to really believe in this and what he's fighting for Duterte, no? And is there not some level of empathy here? What's your take on that? Is it really in his mandate to truly fight for the freedom of President Duterte? Is he just doing his job in the ICC? Is this really his type of position that he likes to fight for? What do you think is his moral stance?
Now you're really making this about me attacking Kaufman. No, but,
I'm not. I'm just picking your brain as an analyst.
Right, you have ICC accredited lawyers, right? So parang I don't know, it's like a dating app, right? So there are all of these different lawyers with their attributes, I suppose their rates, etc. And then pwede ka pumili sa kanila. But there are ways that some of these lawyers could signal, whether more explicitly or not, that they're not interested in defending someone.
Okay, that's what I'm
because
interested
remember,
in. Yeah,
ang taas
okay.
ng threshold para umabot ito sa ICC Right, so I think so probably the people who were open to defending President Duterte are the kind of people who are open to defending that kind of people, right? And perhaps there's a reason why he was not able to get other types of lawyers who probably signaled in different ways that they're not they're not excited to defend someone. Given that there is a lot of evidence to suggest something really horribly went wrong in the Philippines. So, based on my understanding, that now I'm not going to make a moral judgment. That's his profession. That's his job. Having said that, this is not some Hollywood court. This is not Epstein case or whatever.
Exactly.
This is not an American court we're looking at. This is an international court. It's a very serious court. You can see almost poker face lahat. As dramatic as the circumstances are, I mean, you have excellent coverage by media, our friends from One News, from different channels. The reality is that if you look at the court, it doesn't look like your usual Filipino court. It doesn't even look like your American courts. It's a European international court, and it's dead serious. It's
not sensationalized at all, yeah.
Evidence. At hindi mo pwede idaan yan sa mga antics and dramas. Maybe the Kaufman antics sells to Filipino audience or the Duterte supporters because maybe that's our understanding of how courts operate, with all due respect to our system. But Europe is very, very different. I think for anyone who's familiar with, you can even see it from, remember the first day nung dumating si Digong dyan and Medial Dia, right? The former was acting as his lawyer, right? And you could see he was immediately shut down, right? He read this political statement, this embarrassingly legally vacuous statement, and then he was immediately shut down. The next day, wheelchair na siya, umuwi na siya, diba? I mean, you could really see this is a different ball game. This is absolutely different. It's not it doesn't look like our local courts, and absolutely it's not like the Hollywood high level. So the idea that idaan ito sa technicality or galing lang ng I don't think it works that way. Very rigorous ang ICC. The prosecution team is massive. And going back again to what I said a while ago, Rodrigo Duterte is the biggest catch here, and I don't mean it. I don't mean to trivialize it. I mean it. I'm not sure how long the ICC will be around for the coming decades, considering the serious.
Right.
I mean, by the way, the iba na yung spokesman nila. Maraming umalis sa ICC. They cannot do financial transaction. I'm not sure when is the next time they're gonna get a head of state or a former head of state. So they're gonna really be perfectionists about this, airtight about it. They're not gonna get anything wrong. So the margin of error or the margin for using drama to get away
Is very little.
Kaya mahirapan talaga sila, Kaufman and all. Really, their best shot was on the jurisdiction question. And then obviously, there's the elephant in the room is kung ito ay tatagal, right? And we may have different points of view, but my best wishes for the health and safety of President Duterte. I mean, he gets the best treatment possible, even if ICC is under pressure. World-class ang healthcare system dyan sa Netherlands, at The Hague. But we don't know if this trial lasts another year or two, where will be President Duterte in terms of his state of health, mental and physical. Because we know he's a very strong person, but we also know that he's aging, right? And at the end of the day, we're Filipinos, we care about elderly people, we may have political disagreement. So I think many people are also wondering if President Duterte will be in the right moral and psychological state of mind to be able to because
To understand the implications.
If ever ma-arrest sila Bato or yung other alleged co-perpetrators, that could have an interface also with this. Not necessarily the two being one case, but magkakaroon ng interface because may malaking overlap eh. So that could add new dimensions and variables. That's why if you talk to 6 different legal experts who have been following ICC, they'll give you 6 different answers, if not more. Because ang dami mga moving parts. And to be honest, medyo sui generis talaga ito. This is really exceptional. And as a Filipino, it's also exceptionally tragic that umabot tayo sa situation na ito.
Yeah, and on that note, very quickly, Richard, because unfortunately, I could talk to you all day. But anyway, how is this going to affect, how are these proceedings going to specifically affect the political landscape in the Philippines moving forward? We are 2 years to the elections. How is it going to affect the justice system? Is there really going to be a major impact here, and in what sense?
Well, obviously, the emotional temperature was very high last year. I mean, there was a certain circumstance also around me when I visited The Hague last year. This year, medyo mas somber yung support ni President Duterte. I think kung may 5 stages of grief, medyo kapunta na sa acceptance phase, although they won't admit it. I think there's an understanding that maybe this is the beginning of the penultimate chapter, right? But that's one Duterte. There's another Duterte who's by far still the front runner to be the next president of the Philippines. And Attorney Kaufman is a very smart guy, and he has met Sara Duterte a lot. He knows Philippine politics. He knows that these ICC court proceedings are not only in a legal vacuum, they're also not only about international politics. May direct impact din ito sa politika sa Pilipinas. In fact, if you look at Sara Duterte, Vice President Sara Duterte, when she announced with finally some finality, right, that she's really running for presidency, look at the demeanor, naka-black siya. Basically, parang it was like a declaration of war and a promise of vengeance, a vow of vengeance. Na basically, you have done injustice to my father, right? You have persecuted us. This is political persecution, and therefore I'm running to correct this, right? And the Kaufman interventions very much. I'm not sure if they have a WhatsApp group they're coordinating it, but there seems to be a lot of interface there. I don't think the two are happening in isolation. I see some sort of logical continuity, if not direct coordination. That at the end of the day, this is, if they're not gonna get President Duterte what he wants, they will at least get what the next Duterte wants, which is a return to the Malacanang and potentially a campaign of vengeance. They cannot beat ICC, but they can beat their enemies and rivals back in the Philippines if Sara Duterte becomes the next president of the Philippines. So that's why this is extremely, extremely complicated. I'm not even talking about the international politics part of it. For instance, the fact that the Trump administration, galit na galit sa ICC when they issued warrant of arrest against Netanyahu, but the Trump administration has said nothing about President Duterte, even if Duterte and Trump were supposed to be great friends. So you can see there's so much subtleties and so many variables at play here.
And could be even a catalyst, as you mentioned, for VP. Thank you, Richard, for all those insights, and try and get some rest. That was political analyst Richard Haydarian talking to us from The Hague. Stay tuned. Morning Matters will be back after this short break. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. The confirmation of charges hearing for former President Rodrigo Duterte at the International Criminal Court concludes today, February 27th. Both the prosecution and the defense are set to deliver their closing arguments, after which ICC judges will have up to 60 days to decide whether the case will proceed to a full trial. Now, earlier, the ICC pre-trial chamber allowed former President Duterte to skip the scheduled hearing on his detention. A drug war photojournalist has rejected claims that some images presented in relation to the anti-drug campaign were staged or crafted. Basilio Sepe, a member of the Photojournalists Center of the Philippines, told One News that the photos accurately reflect what happened on the ground and were not manipulated. The group earlier condemned suggestions from a defense lawyer at the International Criminal Court that some drug war photos were fabricated, stressing that journalists only documented reality and did not create it.
Gusto lang din namin na patunayan na hindi crafted or hindi staged yung mga nilalabas na photos ng mga photojournalists, especially during those times, 'di ba? At pinapakita lang din namin kung ano yung totoo, what's happening on the ground. At isa 'yan sa mga, syempre, sa larangan ng trabaho namin, yung mag-document ng reality. It was not really surprising actually that Mr. Kaufman made that kind of statement, particularly given his role as a legal counsel defending his client. Pero as for me, I stand firmly, by my work and by our work as journalists, not just with the photojournalists, na the images we documented were real and they were not staged and they reflect of what was happening on the ground. And in many cases, what was happening behind the violence, during the drug war, and which also has deeply affected, yung mga families and the families and individuals sa mga marginalized communities. So journalists who covered that event did not create that reality. We documented it. So it was our responsibility to present facts and visual evidence so the public could understand the truth of what was really happening.
Meanwhile, the Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges will meet in executive session on March 4th to review the ethics case against Senator Bato de la Rosa. That complaint, filed by an anti-corruption group, cites De La Rosa's prolonged absence from Senate sessions since November of last year and alleges possible neglect of duty. Committee Chair Senator J.V. Ejercito says the closed-door meeting will focus on adopting rules and conducting an initial review of cases. De La Rosa has skipped plenary sessions for nearly 4 months following reports of an alleged International Criminal Court arrest warrant against him. The House Transportation Committee continued hearings on the sinking of MV Trisha Kirsten 3, which killed 65 passengers and left 14 others missing. Mobile Journal Amy Atienza has this report.
The House Transportation Committee continued talks on MV Trisha Kirsten 3, where several congressmen expressed their dismay after casualties reached 65 people dead and 14 people missing. The ship sank in the waters off Basilan after departing Zamboanga City for Holosulu.
Ang trahedyang sinapit ng pamilyang sakay ng MV Tricia Kirsten 3 ay hindi isang act of nature but a man-made disaster born from criminal negligence.
Kasi sa tingin ko, the way things are running, parang walang saktong koordinasyon. And parang walang tao on the ground.
The committee, alongside Philippine Coast Guard, discussed more on the rescue operations, as well as the locations where bodies are recovered and the compensations made by stakeholders. PCG also noted that they had constraints upon getting the exact location of the ship, which only occurred 8 to 9 days after the tragedy. Commodore Oliver Tanseco said that technology was a crucial factor on the determination of the ship's location.
Ito po'y beyond sa technical capabilities ng mga Coast Guard search and rescue operators po natin on the ground, including our divers. Kasi po ito pumasok na po sa limit ng maximum allowable depth for a trained divers to go in. Kailangan na po ng technical o diver po natin.
Likewise, PCG already imposed administrative sanctions to its members, including the dismissal without honor of 4 involved personnel. In an inspection made by the Coast Guard Inspector General Internal Affairs Service, the MV Tricia Kirsten 3 team leader and 3 other members are charged with gross neglect of duty.
Doon po sa presentation po kanina, ito po ay administrative sanction, administrative penalties po ito. Ang Philippine Coast Guard po, tama ka po, pareho po kami sa military justice system ng ating pong AFP. Meron po kaming sariling code of conduct.
Kapatid Amy Atienza, we are One News.
The Philippine Medical Association sets goal of 0 dengue deaths by 2030, urging stronger prevention and vaccination efforts. Mobile journalist Ray Vicente reports.
Wala na dapat ang mamatay pa sa dengue. Kaya naman target ng Philippine Medical Association ang 0 dengue deaths sa 2030. #ENDDengue or Empowering Networks to Defeat Dengue Coalition was organized by the Philippine Medical Association on Thursday, February 26. With the aim to have 0 dengue death by 2030, PMA together with the Department of Health calls for strengthening prevention and efforts to fight the viral infection.
And we agree on the other 4 pillars to include community engagement and education, eliminating breeding sites of vectors, epidemiology concerns, focus on integrated dengue surveillance systems, and at last but not least, of course, the development of dengue vaccine.
Active lobbying of new vaccine is being introduced to authorities, especially doctors cited neighboring countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia have already won.
Wala pa pong vaccine na nasa market ngayon. We do have now a next generation which we have been working on to ensure the safety of our children, our people. Vaccine would be the most important preventive measure.
While they acknowledges the lower dengue cases, the high fatality rate is still being emphasized.
Kung ikukumpara natin yung 2025 sa 2024, bumaba po ng 26%. Pag kinumpara naman natin yung dami ng namatay sa dengue, ng 2024 at 2025, bumaba po ng 15%. Pero tingnan nyo kung gaano yung pagbaba. May problema tayo sa dengue kasi hindi katanggap-tanggap na marami ang namamatay.
Filipinos aging 60 years old above have the highest fatality rate, while those aged 1 to 14 still have the most number of cases. For this year, there has been a recorded 14,000 dengue cases in the country as of February.
Ngayong pong 2026 hanggang February 14 ay meron na tayo nampas 14,000 kaso. Malaki pong pagbaba kumpara sa parehong panahon ng 2025. Ito po ay dapat bantayan sapagkat may dalawa po siyang peak cycles. Ang una po ay January at February sapagkat sa eastern part ng ating bansa ay tag-ulan. At ngayon naman po, yung July to October, yun ang pinaka-peak ng dengue sa ating bansa.
PMA reminded public to remain vigilant despite the decrease, especially during first peak of virus this first quarter. Kapatid Ray Vicente, we are One News.
Meanwhile, in sports, Choco Mucho ended a 3-game losing skid with a hard-fought 5-set victory over Galleries Tower in the 2026 PVL All-Filipino Conference. Ea Laure made an immediate impact returning from an injury, finishing with 18 points on 14 attacks, 2 aces and 2 blocks, while also contributing 5 digs and 7 excellent receptions. In another PVL matchup, the Capital One Solar Spikers edged out the Farm Fresh Foxies in 5 sets with Sydney Niego scoring a career-high 20 points and Bella Bean delivering the match-clinching kill. Meanwhile, in UAAP action on Saturday, UST takes on UE in the men's and women's divisions at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., while NU faces UP later in the day. That's at 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. And that wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. We hope we have given you just the right start to your morning. Let's make the day matter. I'm Dani Laurel. Kapatid, we are One News, all sides, all the time.